Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Smart Investing Show with your host, Alton Brooks, aka The Wolf. And tonight is an exciting show as we talk about Afro Inventors and creating generational IP. So let's go. Hello and good evening and welcome to the GBKM Network and the Smart Investing Show with your host, Alton Brooks. Tonight's a very special show as we're going to be talking about creating generational IP, otherwise known as intellectual property. And in doing so, we're going to talk about some of the folks from the past who's helped pave the way for us to get to where we are today. They were inventing even while enslaved, some of them, and that never stopped them from doing what their minds and their dreams was telling them to do. But without further ado, tonight's episode is brought to you by Fifth Dimension Trading. It's where they help people like yourselves to learn how to trade on the stock market and to offer their proprietary services. So thank you, Fifth Dimension Trading, for tonight's sponsor. So we get into our program tonight. And we're going to look at first a very important poem. And this is just a small part of it, just a paragraph from a very powerful poem by Maya Angelou. It's called Still I Rise. And when you get some time, I want you to check out this poem in full. It is a very riveting and powerful poem in my eyes. And I'm just going to read you a small smidget of it. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness. But still, like air, I'll rise. No matter what happens to you, always rise. Don't ever let anything keep you down. Thank you, Maya Angelou, for that wonderful paragraph out of your poem, but feel free to check out the full Still I Rise poem. Let's go to the next slide. So, talking about that, tonight's episode is more about inspiring you. It's about creating inventions. It's about being a designer, a dreamer. So I want to just remind all our viewers that you still have time, even if you don't think you do. You still have time to rise. You still have time to invade spaces you may not feel that you belong. You can still take up space in that area. Claim it. You have to get on up, as they would say. Don't feel sorry for yourself. Some of us may be going through some hard times. Don't feel that it can't be better. A lot of us, too, are in a situation where we're very quiet. We're very silent. We can't be silent. When some things are out of whack or they're not what they should be, we have to speak up. We have to make noise, whether that's at your workplace and you see something happening that you shouldn't, whether that's in the public space where you notice things are happening, whether it's the educational system. You have a voice. You have to use it. So make sure that you speak up. We also got to remember to reach up, reach down, and help lift each other up. If we're successful just by ourselves, that's not going to create a wholesome community. We have to try and reach down and reach up and help our fellow man or fellow woman so that they can also help to achieve their dreams. Always help. Another important thing is we have to remember to find our microphone. The microphone is not just your voice. The microphone is also, what is it that you're good at? Because when you're good at something, what that builds is your confidence. And when you have that confidence, you now have that ability to go out and say something. So find that microphone. Find what is it that you're good at. If you're a designer, what is it that you can create that no one else has the ability to? And then you take that microphone and you tell everyone about it. But that includes having passion. Passion is where you're going to have that drive to do something on a daily basis without even trying. Never chase money. Never chase material items. Those things may come as a byproduct of your passion, but chase your passion, chase your dreams. tighten up your skills, grab your microphone. All right, so tonight's topic, it's about Afro inventions, Afro inventors, creating generational IP. And what do we mean by that? Well, first, let's just define intellectual property. Intellectual property, otherwise known as IP, in the business space, refers to creations, inventions, literary and artistic works and symbols, names and images used in business. In other words, some of the most well-known types are copyrights, patents, trademarks, even trade secrets can fall under this. Basically, everything that has to do with intellectual property protects your brand, protects your image, and also protects your innovation. Let's start with a couple of very interesting inventors from the past. How many of you, I'm not sure how old you might be, but if you were a teenager or a young person in the 80s or 90s, you'd have remembered playing with one of these water guns. I remember playing with some of these water guns. You fill them with water in your tub or your sink, and you went outside and you started spraying everybody with it. Well, guess what? This particular item was invented by someone who looks just like you and me. And you might think, well, this is an easy item. Anybody can do that. Well, guess what? He did it. He was the first one to create that, the first one to patent that. So what that means is that anyone who makes a product looking remotely like this, he gets paid a royalty or a lump sum. His name is Lonnie Johnson, inventor of the Super Soaker water gun. Let's learn some more about him. This is just a smidget of some of the different models of the water guns that he sold throughout the world. Look at that. There's probably at least 200 to 300 versions. And can you imagine if he just sold 10 or 20 versions per city, per country? How many of those would have sold? Next item. All right, let's check out Lonnie Johnson. He was born in 1949. His nickname in high school was the Professor. So check this out. In the 60s, as you know, the civil rights era, slavery was sort of abolished. However, there was still segregation. Blacks could not mix with whites in school. So he was going to this all-black school, Williamson High School. And, every year they have a science fair for all the high schools. Now, they didn't stop black students from attending the science fair. Most of the time there wasn't any, just because of the fact that they were so harshly criticized and weren't encouraged to take part. But he, with his little sort of mock-seed self, said, I'm going to the science fair. And he applied. Maybe they didn't know what color he was at the time. But when he got to the University of Alabama in 1968 for the science fair, he shocked a few people. Because he was the one and only African student in the entire place. But, he didn't let that bother him. He debuted what's called a compressed air powered robot called Linux that he actually made from scraps because he didn't really have any tools, any materials to work with. So he made this robot from scraps. And guess what? Out of all the students that were there, he won the entire competition. So can you imagine that? The pressure that was on him. He couldn't mix with any other students. And he had to just present what he had by himself. And he ends up winning the entire competition. Now that's what you call skills. Here's a picture of what his robot looked like. If we thought we can make robots today, imagine having zero tools except scraps. And he was able, with his very smart and bright self, to make a robot in 1968 against all odds and being the only African American in the crowd win this entire competition. So we got to give it up for Lonnie Johnson. Let me tell you a little bit more about him. After university, and I think he went to Tuskegee University, he joined the Air Force, and he continued studying engineering. And he's actually one of the first people that helped to develop the United States stealth bomber. You might see these bombers, when they're doing these wars, and they're going in 30,000 feet and dropping all kinds of payload. But he developed that stealth bomber from back in the early days, along with the team that worked on that. And then he joined NASA as a systems engineer, and they're working on their Galileo Jupiter project, as well as their Saturn mission project. So he worked on these particular projects, and then he started getting the itch for inventing. And he worked on this particular invention of the water gun for about 7 years, till about 1989. And then he left NASA at that point, once he perfected it, and he sold the rights to a very large company called Laramie Corp, which was a major toy distributor. And guess what? By 1991, they had sold $200 million worth of product. So this was a major, major invention. In fact, he was able to get another $73 million from Hasbro, who eventually bought this particular company and took over their rights. So this brother was a major player when it came to getting paid for his intellectual property. That's property that belongs to you, and if somebody wants it, they got to pay you for it, whether in cash or in royalties. That's the importance of intellectual property. Let's look at another one of my favorites, George Washington Carver. He was born in 1864, and he invented some major agricultural uses for products, mainly the peanut, but he also did a lot more. Let's find out some more about him. So he developed techniques used to improve soil depleted by cotton use. If you remember now, 1864, we're still having a civil war, slavery is still happening, and cotton was a major product out of the slavery system at the time. But what will normally happen is once the cotton is used up, the soil is depleted, they had to wait a long time for that to be used again. And that was wasting a lot of valuable agricultural space. So George Washington Carver, he came up with an idea to help with that situation by rotating crops. When the cotton ended, harvest ended, well, instead of waiting for another 6 months to come back around so that you can plant cotton again, maybe we do peanuts now, and soybeans, and sweet potatoes, and peas. So he was one of the major architects of rotating crops to maximize yields and to make sure that there's always something coming. In fact, he created well over 145 different peanut recipes, also many sweet potato recipes, and eventually he ran an industrial lab that he started creating many more products with. In fact, I believe he's worked on other products in his lab at the time that he came close to getting some patents for as well. But let's take a closer look at his life. He was actually born into slavery in Missouri. His so-called master purchased his parents in 1855, if you can just believe the atrocity of some of these things that went on back then, but that was the way of the land. His master, I guess his name was Carver, purchased his parents for $700, Mary and Giles. That's an awful thing. But in spite of being born into slavery and the hardships of being raised in that kind of climate. He still became the first black student to get into Iowa State University in their agriculture program. And mainly because of the abilities he possessed in that area, he kept going and going and going until he finally got into university. He also received a master's degree from Iowa State as well in 1896. So you can imagine being born into slavery, having all these check marks against you, but still having the intestinal fortitude to become the first person to become a black faculty member at Iowa State University and to have patents in agriculture. You got to give it up for George Washington Carver. Let's move on to Madame C.J. Walker, who was actually born Sarah Breedlove in 1867. She invented specialized hair products for Afro hair just like mine. Let's find out about her. Now, she got into this sort of area, maybe not by accident, because she actually suffered from scalp and hair loss ailments, which led to inventing a line of Afro-based hair products. She eventually created a lab to manufacture cosmetics and to train beauticians. In fact, she became one of the very first millionaires in this industry. Now, for Madame C.J. Walker, unlike the other couple of folks that we've looked at previously, she was born free on a cotton plantation in Louisiana, maybe just by a couple of years, because the Civil War ended in 1865 or so. So this is 1867, she was born free. One of the only of the 5 children for her parents that was actually born free. Her parents, Owen and Minerva, were enslaved. I guess she was one of 5 children, and she was the only one that was born free. She, though, became an orphan at the age of 7. Both her parents tragically had passed away. And at 10 years old, found herself picking cotton in cotton fields. But she didn't let where she was determine who she was going to be. Because all the while picking cotton, she was dreaming and she was thinking. And she was wondering, what is it that she wanted to do with her life? She eventually met her husband, Charles Walker, hence her surname Walker. He was very instrumental in helping her to create advertisements and helping her to build her business while she grew that across America. So we got to give it up for Madame C.J. Walker and the hair care products that she's provided for us. At this point, we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back and talk about the wonderful Patricia Bath. So we'll be right back.
Are you craving some home-cooked African meals but are missing the authentic ingredients? No worries. Head over to Dunami's Food online groceries at www.mydunamisfood.com to check out our collection of the best quality African and Caribbean foods. From swallows to spices to meats and produce, expect top quality customer service and have your groceries delivered to your door when you shop at Dunami's Food. Don't forget, go to www.mydunamisfood.com and get a taste of home. It'll be like you never left. Dunami's Food, keeping you smiling always. Nous vous gardons toujours le sourire. Are you craving some home-cooked African meals but are missing the authentic ingredients? No worries. Head over to Dunami's Food online groceries at www.mydunamisfood.com to check out our collection of the best quality African and Caribbean foods. From swallows to spices to meats and produce, expect top quality customer service and have your groceries delivered to your door when you shop at Dunami's Food. Don't forget, go to www.mydunamisfood.com and get a taste of home. It'll be like you never left. Dunami's Food, keeping you smiling always. Nous vous gardons toujours le sourire. Are you craving some home-cooked African meals but are missing the authentic ingredients? No worries. Head over to Dunami's Food online groceries at www.mydunamisfood.com to check out our collection of the best quality
Welcome back to the Smart Investing Show on the GBKM Network with your host, Alton Brooks. It is our summer finale as we finalize our series of great interviews and great information that we provided you over the last 6 months or so. We certainly hope that you've enjoyed it, but continue checking out GBKM for all of their programming and lots of great hosts, lots of great shows, entertainment, FM station, www.gbkm.tv for live programming, .fm for the radio. Also, feel free to download the GBKM app. Now, this evening, our episode is brought to you by Fifth Dimension Trading. We're glad to have them provide you some information tonight in regard to inventions. And we're hoping that tonight's episode can spur you and inspire you to think about what can you invent. Do you have it in you? Do you have designing abilities? Do you have the ability to create out of your mind? Whatever's between your two ears, no one can take away. But the important thing is if you create something, that you bring it out to the fruition of intellectual property. So we're going to continue with some of our forefathers and foremothers whose shoulders we stand on, who in times of segregation, times of slavery, hard times, was able to still push through, create inventions, and create intellectual property. So my challenge to you is this: if they can do that back in their time, what is stopping us today? We've got no excuse. I know we've got anti-black racism. We've got problems in school. We've got employment equity issues. But we've got to find a way to rise above all that to take our equal place and our equal share of all the opportunities available to us. So let's look at the next one. Patricia Bath. She was born in 1942. And guess what she invented? The laser patho probe for cataract treatments. And she did this. And as recently as 1986. So as you can see, you can still do great things today. Because just 30, 40 years ago, great things are still being done. Nothing is beyond your reach. Let's find out about Patricia Bath. She was the first Afro-American doctor to receive a medical patent. Now that's big. Now keep in mind, in slavery days, many inventions were made by black individuals. They just were not given credit for it. So it's quite possible that some inventions were made in the past that were not properly credited to the original owners. In fact, many of them went to the owners of the slave because they were not considered technically humans. They were considered property. So as property, they did not have the right to actually register a patent. That's how Neanderthal things were back then when it comes to slavery. But here we are. We have Patricia. Just go back for me. Who was the first doctor to receive a medical patent. And in 1988, she received a full patent for laser technology, which was less painful and more precise for the treatment of cataracts. I'm not sure if you yourself has experienced it, or if you've got parents that might have experienced it, but cataracts are one of the most painful things that you can have. So your eyes are constantly swollen. You're feeling the pressure in your pupil. It's like your face is going to explode. And just to actually have surgery for that was quite painful. So here comes Miss Patricia Bath, who says, you know what? I'm going to use this thing called laser technology, and I'm going to make it less painful, and it's going to actually be even more precise to get the cataracts out that is causing the problems. She was definitely a pioneer also in telemedicine. Next. So let's find out a little bit about her. She's born in New York, born in Harlem. How many folks in New York are watching? What's going on, Harlem? Her dad was Rupert, and her mom was Gladys. What did her dad teach her? Well, he taught her about travel and exploring cultures and being open and receptive to different things. And her mom, well, the only thing she did was just bought her a chemistry set. I mean, probably cost $1, who knows at the time. But little did her mom know that this itty bitty chemistry set with what would set Patricia Bath on fire. She loved this chemistry set, and she just loved everything about chemistry. And from that day on, she was hooked. She had a passion for finding out about anything to do with chemistry. So sometimes as parents, we may think that, giving a child a certain, present may not be meaningful, but sometimes just the smallest things we can give our children can really open their minds and make them think. So instead of just giving games and giving things that they already have maybe tons of already, toys, give them things that are useful and that they can actually use to think about what can they do with this and what more can they do with it. So this little chemistry set is what set Patricia Bath on her path. That at the age of 16, this wonder kid actually attended a cancer research workshop. And they were so impressed with what she had to say and contribute that as a 16-year-old, they included her findings in the scientific paper that came out of that workshop as a 16-year-old. Now, is that not some badass woman or what? You got to give her Patricia Bath. Next we have Lewis Howard Latimer, born in 1848. Sounds again like someone born into slavery. But I love the glasses. Check the glasses out on him. Just looking at him, he looks like a smart brother. So he invented quite a few things, actually. One of the main ones was a process for manufacturing carbon filaments for the light bulb. Let's find out more about that. So here's a gentleman, born in 1848. Of course, back then you weren't allowed to read, allowed to write as an enslaved person. But he taught himself mechanical drawing and drafting after taking part in the 1864 Civil War. I mean, here's a gentleman, he's got no rights, he's got nothing. They don't even consider him a human being. But he volunteered up himself to serve in the army. And you really got to just, I just shake my head. I mean, I don't know if I could do that. I mean, someone tells me I'm nothing, and then I turn around and still want to serve the country. I mean, I find that incredible. But anyways, after that Civil War, he taught himself mechanical drawing and drafting. And he went as far as to design an improved railway car bathroom. Because back in those days, it was very, very tough to use bathrooms. They were not made in a way that was conducive for just properly using them. And he created a design that actually made it easy to use the bathroom on the railway cars. And he also created an air conditioner unit that made it easier for people to be in harsh environments and made it cooler. But check this out. This is one of the coolest things I find about Lewis Latimer. Everyone knows about the telephone. We all have one. And merged and morphed into the cell phone. But when this early thing called the telephone was coming out, we all heard about Alexander Graham Bell, how he created the telephone. Well, guess what? He could not have done this without Lewis Latimer, who was working right beside Alexander Graham Bell to help draft the patents for the design of the telephone in 1876. In fact, it's only through Latimer's help that they were able to actually hand in this design hours before someone else had a similar design who was looking to patent a similar telephone. So it's only by hours that Alexander Graham Bell was able to patent the telephone. But if not from Lewis Latimer spending hours and nights and sleepless days assisting him in helping him to develop this product and the patent for it, you wouldn't be hearing about that today. So this is a very bad dude, Lewis Latimer. Now, again, he created long-lasting filaments for bulbs. He worked with the Edison Company. But let's find out some of his personal information. He was born in Massachusetts. His parents were George and Rebecca, who they themselves had run away from slavery. Now, I don't know about you, but when you run away from slavery, you don't want to go back. But I'll tell you a story. See, his father was a very light-skinned man, and his mother was a very dark-skinned woman. So when they ran away from slavery, his father actually posed as a slave owner. And that's how they actually got by, because he was very light-skinned. He passed in the crowd as a white man. And his wife, they pretended that she was his slave. So that's how they were able to live in Massachusetts for a while without anyone sort of catching on to the fact that there actually were slaves. But eventually, guess what happened? They figured him out. There were fugitive warnings out. Pictures started floating around, and they eventually caught on to the fact that he was, in fact, a runaway slave. So they caught him. And they eventually brought him to trial, etc. And the judge, of all things, ruled that even though he had run away, he still legally belonged to his owner. I mean, when you think about the justice system and some of the decisions you see come out of it sometimes, just imagine back in the 1800s, you have a so-called judge stating that legally it's okay for a man to own another man. And that's backed up by the justice system. Now, thankfully, because slavery was coming to an end, they had a minister in the audience who actually was able to raise $400. And that paid for his release out of the slavery system. Now, one of the things that Lewis loved to do from a young child, he loved to read and he loved to draw. In fact, I told you earlier that he promoted him, so he learned how to do drafting on his own when he was working as an office boy in his first job after leaving the armed forces. He was working as an office boy for $3 a week. Once they realized the drafting skills that he possessed, that he learned totally on his own, they hired him as a draftsman, and they tripled his salary to $20 a week. So skills, people, skills will get you raises. So don't sleep on skills. Now, Sarah Boone, she was born in 1832. And what did she do? First of all, before I even get to that, just look at that dress. I mean, talk about style and fashion. You know, I'd sometimes say it a little bit of a different way, but for the audience, style and fashion, look at that. In fact, she was a seamstress, a dressmaker, and she made her own clothes. Let's find out about more of her, that she invented an improved ironing board. So she was a dressmaker who was awarded one of the first patents by an Afro-American woman in 1892 for an improved ironing board design. Now, let's keep in mind, prior to that, the first ironing board was patented by Elijah McCoy. But along came Sarah Boone years later, and she made a lot of improvements on it. Now, the thing about patents and trademarks and those things, more so patents, if you can improve a product substantially from how it is today, you could potentially make a new patent for a new product based on the design of someone else. So she was able to take this particular previous patent, and she's able to tweak it sufficiently and make it new enough and change it enough to actually get a new patent out of it. And this one she called the ironing board. Previous to that, it wasn't necessarily called an ironing board, but it looked similar. What they had done previously Well, we talk about that in a minute. But it adapted to the convenience of ironing sleeves, and it also had other edges that allowed it to be changed differently. But being a dressmaker, she faced fierce competition. So she had to find ways for her dresses to catch the eye of her customers. And like I mentioned before, what they were using were wood planks. And they'd iron dresses on that, but it wouldn't come out very well because they'd have to put it on 2 chairs, and that's how they were ironing back then. So her solution actually created a curved board with padding, and she applied for a patent for that in 1891, and she was successful. And hence, the ironing board we all use today is from Sarah Boone, who patented that in 1891. So I've got to give thanks to her. She was born Sarah Marshall, North Carolina. Her parents were enslaved. James Boone was a free man for a while. But her mother was enslaved, but eventually she was able to get her freedom through her husband. Now, I call this the first subway system, the Underground Railroad. And she actually used part of that system to go from North Carolina up to Connecticut without anyone knowing or finding her whereabouts. And she eventually settled there. She eventually got married, and they were successfully able to purchase a house. Back in those days, you didn't see too many black families doing that. So she was very successful with her business. The fact that she had a patent meant she was getting money from that. Now, we also got to remember back in slavery time, it was illegal, again, to teach people to read and write, black people. But she made it a mission that she was going to teach herself how to read. And by the age of 40, she did just that. Congratulations to Sarah Boone. Whatever you put your mind to, you can do it. So, we're just going to summarize today about inventions, creating generational IP. What are some of the lessons learned? One of the things that I saw in common with a lot of these past inventors from the 1800s to 19th century, 20th century, they all developed a love for reading. Even ones who couldn't read. Eventually they figured it out. And once they started reading, they never stopped. So if you're watching this program tonight, I encourage you to develop a love for reading. You're going to find so many worlds open up to you that you don't even know exist right now. Your creativity is going to go off the charts. Your dreams are going to go off the charts. The things you think you can do is going to go off the charts because there's so many things you don't even know about yourself right now. Reading frees your mind. We all know the Marcus Garvey saying. Let's not adhere yourself to mental slavery. Free your mind. Free your mind. Let your imagination go wild. You can do anything you put your mind to. Never limit yourself and always reach for the stars. So I hope tonight's episode with some of these heroes from the past who've had inventions even while enslaved can encourage us today who are free to go out and do great things because you have it in you. Remember, we're kings, we're queens. We come from a lineage of Africans that were the first civilization who created just about everything on earth. Math, everything else. So don't ever hold yourself back. Again, this is our summer finale episode. We thank you for tuning in with us as we brought you all these particular episodes that we thought would be uplifting to you, encouraging, inspiring, and can also aspire you to great things. So have yourself a great rest of summer and enjoy the rest of the year. You take care for now.
African and Caribbean foods. From swallows to spices to meats and produce, expect top quality customer service and have your groceries delivered to your door when you shop at Dunami's Food. Don't forget, go to www.mydunamisfood.com and get a taste of home. It'll be like you never left. Dunami's Food, keeping you smiling always. Nous vous gardons toujours le sourire. Are you craving some home-cooked African meals but are missing